Hello there. Today I'm looking at a hugely exciting English sparkling wine. This is Sugrue South Downs, The Trouble with Dreams from the 2020 vintage. Dermot Sugrue is almost certainly the most exciting and the most challenging producer of English sparkling wines at the moment. And visiting Dermot is something I've wanted to do for a number of years. So the visit I made in early September as part of a group with the Institute of Masters of Wine was actually one of the high points of a really excellent set of visits, English vineyards and wine producers. This is also the second wine that I'm looking at from the half suitcase load of wines that I brought in my VinGuardValise back from the UK to New Zealand. So one of the purposes in showing it to you is to show, hopefully, that there's been no diminution in quality, no reduction in quality as a result of shipping. At the stage of recording, I've been back for a little over 3 weeks now, so the wines have had a little bit of time to settle down, so I'm hoping this will be showing perfectly by now. Having tasted the wine with its producer, Dermot Sugrue, at the winery a little over a month ago, I'm confident that I should be able to know what to expect from it. So to talk about Dermot Sugrue, he's an enigmatic Irishman who to my mind is clearly making some of the best English wines on the market at the moment. He's talented, he's hardworking, prolific producer of wines both for himself and also for other labels. He's proved himself highly determined to succeed over most of the last 20 years. A highly personable character, a storyteller, somebody who loves going off on a tangent. He's self-deprecating, he's quirky. He says of himself that he embraces chaos. His wines and their marketing are full of many tiny personal touches. The labels of their wines stress that they're an independent, artisan, boutique producer, and I think that sums up their ethos very well. Now, Dermot came to England in the early 2000s as a student studying in East Anglia. He says he had an interest in making booze and ended up doing a couple of vintages in Bordeaux, making wine both in Pomerol and in Saint-Julien. And that gave him a passion for winemaking and saw him return to the UK to Plumpton College and study viticulture and enology there. He joined Nye Timber, the sparkling wine producer, in 2003 as an assistant winemaker, and within a year had actually gained the position of head winemaker. The year 2006 saw Dermot invited by the monastic order at Storrington Priory in West Sussex to plant a vineyard for them on one of their sites. The same year also saw him involved in the planting of the nearby Whiston Estate's first vineyards. By the end of 2006, Dermot had left Nye Timber and had joined Whiston, where he was to spend the next 16 years as their head winemaker. While at Whiston, Dermot was also making wines for other labels such as Digby, Black Dog Hill, Jenkin Place, and of course his own range of wines. Initially those were marketed under the name of Sugrue Pierre, but he drew back from that as he realised that people actually were thinking that he was French and that he made champagne. It's their current branding, Sugrue South Downs. This wine is called The Trouble with Dreams, and again, this is one of Dermot's stories. Having planted the vineyard in 2006, in 2008 it looked as if they were going to get a good crop, and they had high hopes of making their first vintage there. The grapes looked in excellent condition until they were entirely eaten by birds. And it was Father Paul McMahon, a priest from the priory, who evidently said to Dermot, "That's the trouble with dreams." Dermot was undeterred by this obvious setback, pressed on, and the following year the now bird-protected vines yielded up an excellent harvest, and the 2009 was the first vintage of this particular wine, which Dermot decided to name The Trouble with Dreams. And actually, if you look at the bottom of the front label, you'll see there's an image of a priest, and that's in commemoration of Paul McMahon saying that. And you can also see around the label and on the sides and on the back label there are some images of a flock of birds. So the 2020 vintage of this wine is a combination of fruit from 3 vineyards: the Mount Harry vineyard, the Cold Harbour vineyard and the Storrington Priory vineyard. Mount Harry's in East Sussex and the other 2 vineyards are in West Sussex. They're all on South Downs chalk and were all planted in either 2005 or 2006, making them some of the oldest vineyards in England that are planted with champagne grape varieties. The vineyards are all farmed sustainably and the fruit is hand-picked. This vintage was made at the Whiston Estate Winery, and there it was pressed in their traditional cockard basket press. So this is a wide shallow basket press, typical of the sort of presses that are used to produce champagne. Now, at least half the juice was fermented in old oak barrels, predominantly 600 litre ex-Burgundy barrels, and I think probably a certain amount of barriques, just to get the proportions correct. The remaining portion of the wine was fermented in stainless steel tanks, and evidently the portion that was fermented in stainless steel, that was encouraged to go through malolactic conversion, just to soften out the crispness a little. So there's a certain amount of malic acid retained from the portion that was fermented and aged in oak, but a little more softness coming from the stainless steel fermented portion. Both first and second fermentations were done using cultured, neutral champagne yeasts. The label says the blend here is 60% Chardonnay with 40% Pinot Noir, although Dermot actually suggested that there may be a tiny percentage of Meunier in here. I think they've just got a few rows of what in old nomenclature would be Pinot Meunier, a tiny amount of which may have found its way into this cuvée. The wine was bottled on the 19th of June 2021, underwent its second fermentation in bottle under the traditional method, then stayed aging on its yeast lees for 42 months, dégorgement starting on the 24th of January 2025. The wine's noted as being vegan friendly, so in other words they use no animal or dairy proteins for fining. And quite touchingly, there's a tiny dedication in quite small print on the back label, just saying, in loving memory of Tim Renton. Now, it was Tim who, with his wife Alice Renton, planted the Mount Harry vineyard on which some of the fruit for this wine came. And evidently Tim passed in 2020. It's a small personal dedication in a friend's memory. There's no mention of the fact that Tim Renton actually was Lord Renton and was a senior member of government back in the 1990s. And I think that's the sort of personal touch that you see throughout Dermot Sugrue's wines. So anyway, let's have a quick look at the wine, shall we? I've been talking for a while, but there's still a fine bead of very tiny bubbles rising from the wine. It has a pale yellow colour with greenish hues, but there's no lack of colour density there. Let's see what we make of the aroma, shall we? The aromas are fresh, and there really is a mineral top note to the whole thing. There are notes of citrus, lemon, lemon curd. And yes, there are yeasty notes where there's almost a tiny touch of marmite to the aromas as well. It doesn't sound as if those two would fit together, but actually they're incredibly harmonious, going from a rich lemon, lime, citrus through to some toasty, yeasty tones. It's a really enticing aroma. There is a very definite sapid minerality here. So let's have a taste, shall we? The sapidity and the minerality are quite immediate on the palate, which is dry. Evidently the wine only has a 6 gram dosage, so that's leaving it quite lean. The quite mineral nature of the fruit is nicely supported by what is actually quite a delicate yeastiness. There's something about the mineral nature of the acidity that's actually allowing me to taste yeastiness down the sides of my tongue, with a sort of a more creamy nature in the centre of the tongue and to the tip. Behind all of this, there's more of that sort of lovely lemon curd fruit, almost developing to a candied peel note on the back palate. The wine's leanness clearly shows it's a Chardonnay dominated wine. I think if I didn't know otherwise, I might venture that this was a Blanc de Blanc wine. However, perhaps there is something about the richness, a little tiny redness to the fruit just at the back. It's interacting with the delicate autolytic yeast lees notes. I think maybe that's where I'm seeing a tiny bit of Pinot influence, just broadening it out a bit. There is a lovely freshness that's giving the wine good length, and the fruit slowly builds throughout the wine. I haven't mentioned the mousse, which was lovely and soft. It was fantastically smooth, harmoniously fitted in below the fruit on the front palate just to lift that a bit. And as the fruit of the wine is fading in my palate, it's receding and it's leaving a saline note that's lingering incredibly well, just sitting there along with some slight citric notes right at the very end. This is an elegant, complex, harmonious wine. It's a delight to try. I've really enjoyed it. Quite clearly, Dermot's wines are wines that are designed to age for at least 4 or 5 years, possibly longer. I think perhaps given this wine's softness, it's probably a wine that is more immediate than some of the wines he produces. But I think this will give delightful drinking over at least the next 5 or 6 years. Gosh, it's fantastic. There still is that wonderful sapidity remaining on the middle of my tongue. In terms of the wine's quality, I looked to see if there was a Wine Searcher aggregated critic score. Alas, for this individual vintage, there isn't, but overall for all vintages, the aggregated score comes out at 91 out of 100. I have to say, that's a little lower than I would judge this wine. I think this wine's worth at least 94 out of 100. It has such intensity, such finesse, wonderful harmony, and such outstanding individuality in its character. I'm incredibly impressed by it. I should also say that in terms of the quality of the wine, I can see absolutely no reduction in its quality as a result of shipping. This is a wine that's completely pristine. It doesn't seem to have suffered in any way whatsoever, despite the fact that it's been in a suitcase that has spent a day on aircraft coming from the UK to New Zealand via Dubai. So it will have been in a cold aircraft hold. It will have been probably taken out onto the tarmac, possibly jostled around a little there in the warmth of a Dubai day while it's moved to another aircraft. And it will have been thrown around in the baggage handling systems of a couple of airports. The case has patently done what it's supposed to do and protected the wine through that journey. So thank you so much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, do please press the like button. It'd be really useful to help the channel grow. If you aren't already, it would be great if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, and do please set yourself an alert. Make sure that you're amongst the first people to watch the video. That all helps to convince the algorithm that this is a channel worth watching and helps me to grow my viewers. Therefore, if you have any friends you think might like to watch it, do feel free to pass it on to them. I'd really appreciate your endorsement in that way. I will, of course, leave a link to the Wine Searcher webpage for this vintage of this wine, so that you can follow that. You can see how much the wine costs if it's available in your market, and all the other background detail that's available on those pages. So thank you once again for joining me. I do hope that you'll perhaps manage to make some time in the near future. Come and join me for another tasting. Until then, bye for now.